Service members of Reddit. What is your worst military wife story? Long story short, someone in my unit walked in on his wife cheating on him with someone else. B from our unit. They separate. She moves in with B and leaves the unit. 8 months later, we return from a deployment, and A goes on one date with a girl. His ex-wife finds out and calls the 1STSGT. A gets charged with adultery and reduced in rank, while B only got switched to a different unit. Saw a newer airman with no belt on. I asked, why don't you have a belt? He said he can't afford one, so I give him $5 and tell him to go get a belt. A few weeks later I see him at Ruby Tuesday cleaning tables. I ask around, and apparently his wife was growing weed in base housing and he got kicked out of the military. He swore he didn't know what she was doing. The issue is that people forget the military is filled with 18 to 20-year-old boys, many of whom IMO lacked relationship experience, and marry the first girl who gives them attention. A guy in my shop, Air Force, deployed to Iraq for 4.5 months. Before he left, he signed over general power of attorney to his wife. While he was gone, she started f***ing another guy in our shop, then signed the divorce paperwork as his power of attorney and his rights to see his kids, as well as draining his bank account. She went to live with the other guy in my shop and his friend off base. They were both arrested for check fraud when trying to pass off a check that was the roommates in the shop at on base. The guy she divorced eventually got full custody of the kids, and the other guy in my shop got kicked out of the AF. There were other stories of cheating and all of that kind of shit, but this one takes the cake. She actively worked to ruin his life when all he did was love his kids and get deployed to Iraq. Don't give anyone general power of attorney, ever. I don't care how much you trust them or how much you think they love you. Don't do it. You can give them specialized power of attorney that only allows them to handle your affairs that you very specifically need them to handle. Oh man, so many. One friend in the Corps, a first-term sergeant who hated every minute he was in uniform. He re-enlisted so she could go to school, left for deployment after re-enlistment, came back to a divorce and a drained bank account, had another sergeant who met his wife while he and like 7 other guys were running a gangbang on her. He decided he needed to marry her. So many shit stories there, but I mean he probably deserved them, 'cause I mean wow. How did you two meet? Well, it was a magical night and I was the 5th guy to dick her down that night and thought, I need to get to know this woman better. She could be the one. I'll tell my brother's story. Air Force. He went to work one day, had a normal day, then came home. When he arrives home, his wife's car is gone. He thinks nothing of it. He goes into the house, and it's a disaster. Clothes strewn everywhere, appliances in weird piles all around the house, and a bunch of stuff is missing: washer, dryer, fridge, light bulbs, the bed, couch, etc., etc. Most terrifying of all, though, is that their son is also missing. Along with a bunch of his stuff, his son was around 5 or 6 at the time. He starts to freak out, because there's no note about it anywhere. He tries to call his wife, but her phone is off. He tries to get a hold of his wife's family, but nobody answers. He calls mutual friends, nobody has any idea. He then calls the police and reports that they've been kidnapped, and states that her car is missing, and thus it must have been stolen during the kidnapping. Remember this part. It comes up again in the future. The police come out and take a statement, and then she finally calls him while the police are there. She tells him that she's staying with her family, and that they are getting a divorce. She also has a restraining order on him, as she has told a judge that he is abusive and violent. He is not, and she later admitted she felt bad about lying, but she wanted custody, and her lawyer advised her to say that. The bitch knew when he would come home, and waited 45 minutes until after the fact to call him and let him know his life has been The son is fine, he relaxes as much as he can, but she has really him here. The restraining order gets him in trouble with his boss, and he's up for a while by how bad he was blindsided. And keep in mind, this brother of mine served 3 tours in the Middle East, in Iraq, Afghanistan. This shook him up more than an IED did, so everything is okay at least. A few days go by, and they start working with lawyers to solve everything. Well, guess what? Remember when he reported that her vehicle was missing, stolen? She used that in their custody battle as evidence that he was malicious and vindictive because he did it to cause her trouble with the law, and to scare her, and the judge ends up siding with her and punishing my brother for filing a bogus police report when he thought they had been kidnapped. No joke. My brother's lawyer was a buffoon and she came from a family with money who got her good lawyers. She took him to the cleaners and got everything she wanted. Even the very house she abandoned when she left him. She didn't move into the house though. She just evicted my brother and then sold it months later for much less than it was worth. It took him years to recover mentally and financially. He's out of the military now 20 years in, retired and getting his civilian life on track. He has a great relationship with his son, and his ex-wife continues to be a constant source of pain and misery. My brother handles it like a champ though, because as he puts it, no matter how horrible and demanding she is, he has faced far worse just working in the military. My brother is an absolute legend. His life has been full of ups and downs, more downs than ups, but he still keeps going. I respect him more than anyone else out there, and without a doubt he is my hero. Love that dude. I am a military spouse, but worked as a DOD employee with the Marines. Got a call that a military spouse was in the hospital. Her place on base housing had gotten broken into. The 9-month pregnant spouse was raped and beaten and taken by ambulance to the hospital. The assault caused a miscarriage. I was devastated and went to the hospital with several officers in the Marines' chain of command. One of the nurses tending her looked me in the eye and said, "I am very interested in how this is going to play out." I was so confused. The 9-month pregnant rape and assault victim was given an ultrasound and blood work performed upon being admitted to the hospital. She hadn't been pregnant. She wasn't raped. Her due date was the next day and she's been faking the pregnancy the whole time. She beat herself up and carved herself up with a knife, then made up the rape story resulting in miscarriage as a way to cover up the 9 months of lying to her husband about being pregnant. I've never seen this level of crazy until 3 months later, when said Marine reunited with batshit crazy girl even after all that. Standing gate guard in Washington, D.C. Officer's wife drives through the gate and presents her ID. I wave her through. She doesn't move, asking me if I forgot something. I said no, I didn't believe I did. She said I forgot to salute her, pointing to the blue sticker on her windshield. I leaned close to her windshield and saluted the sticker, wishing it a good afternoon. I got removed from that duty. Repeat after me. You are not your husband's rank. Posting on behalf of my husband. Worst. They came back from a 15-month tour in Iraq. His platoon sergeant went home to find another man living in his house, with his wife and kids. His kids' toddlers were calling the guy daddy. When he walked in, his wife basically said, "Yeah, I want a divorce. I'm with him now." Worst part was the platoon sergeant and new daddy kinda worked together *, but was one of the few who stayed behind for clerical stuff while the rest deployed. Yes, I know this is absolutely against the rules. This was when shit was the Wild West and a DUI was an unofficial requirement for E6. I asked my husband what happened after this. He doesn't know what happened to Jody, aka deployment replacement daddy. The husband threatened to take the kids and kick her onto the street, which he definitely had grounds to do. Instead she agreed to on-demand sex and threesomes, including summoning a prostitute if he wanted one and helping him keep it on the DL. So I was assigned to Pensacola, NAS for some training. I wasn't going to be there long and shouldn't have dated. 21-year-old me was stupid. I met a girl off base and we started to date. She loved that I was in the military while constantly saying she didn't like military guys. Should have been a red flag. She literally pretended to be the perfect girlfriend. Whatever hobby I mentioned, she said, "OMG, I'm into that too." She did everything possible to act like we were a perfect match. She even said she worked as a FEMA office manager when I told her I joined because I like to help people. 4 months goes by and I get orders to Cannon AFB in New Mexico. I mention that I have to go soon. She knew I was just there temporarily, and she starts hinting at wanting to go with me. Thinking I'm in a really good relationship, I agree. We get to New Mexico and I rent us a place. I was actually supposed to live on base in dorms for about a year until I ranked up to senior airman. Things between us go downhill immediately after moving into our place. She suddenly didn't enjoy doing anything I did and had a really bad attitude. She said it was just nerves from moving so far. Fast forward 2 months and I'm getting bitched out by my captain for living off base without authorization. I explained my situation and he said to send her back or get married. Yup, you guessed it. Got married. We were married for 9 years. She was a miserable bitch the whole time. Refused to get a job, so I had to 100% support her. Turns out she really couldn't get a job because she just had a GED and her only work experience is as a receptionist for maintenance at a trailer park. She lied about the FEMA job. Right before our 9-year mark she begs me to get out of the military so we can move back to Florida. Her grandmother died and she said we had to take care of her grandfather. Stupidly, I did it. We get to Florida and her grandfather is fine. We only saw him a handful of times over the course of 2 years. Eventually I catch on that she's been cheating on me and I throw her crap out of my house and she moves in with her boyfriend. Apparently she wanted to go back to Florida because there were some guys there she wanted to hook up with. When I met her she was 140 and blew up to 350 within 2 years of us being together. So I really had no interest in her sexually. Plus she was a bitch. Initiated divorce and she wouldn't cooperate. She kept breaking into my house with her boyfriend and looting my place. I'd bring home groceries and they'd be gone the next time I left the house. Cops wouldn't do anything because we were married and same with landlord. I decided to move and she caught wind. I'm at school and she clears my house out. I go to her place to confront her and she calls the cops. I get accused of burglary and battery and the police believe her because the sociopath can cry on command. I end up getting a plea deal to withhold adjudication of a felony and 3 years of probation. My lawyer convinced me to take it. During the process I find out she was never legally married to me. She was and still is married to a career criminal up in Michigan. She had me take care of her for nearly a decade, while miserable the whole time, and she heavily utilized her medical benefits from being a military dependent. She was never actually my legal wife. My PO felt bad and I was able to get off my probation at 1 year and 5 months. Charges were lessened so they could be sealed and eventually expunged. She literally has suffered 0 consequences for what is basically bigamy with fraud, a class felony. Florida won't help because they said New Mexico has jurisdiction. New Mexico won't do anything because she is out of state. See this? This is what makes me understand murder, just a little bit. I was stationed at FT, Knox Kai in the late 80s. A soldier's child turned up missing. Damn near every solider on FT, Knox was looking for this kid. We looked for days. Kid never turns up. I leave, and move on. Several years later I'm sent back to FT, Knox. Out of the blue, a bunch of activity is happening at a park several miles away. The little girl turned up. Some of her anyway, and it turns out that the soldier's wife, the girl's stepmom, killed the girl. The soldier came home, found out and hid the body in the park. The whole case was solved because the older sister of the girl was starting to get worried she was next. Told a teacher who got the police involved. That the worst I've heard of. Over 20+ years in the army. Plenty of cheating. Plenty of other stuff. Oh, I'm gonna post some of my friend's highlights. She was the midwife on an Air Force base. Delivered lots of babies. Colonel brought his 16-year-old daughter in because she was pregnant. Turns out the father was a new junior enlisted. He did not last long in the military. Dude's wife left him, and moved in with her boyfriend off base while he was deployed. She got knocked up. Since they were still married, she was still going to the base for medical care. Their divorce wasn't final by her due date, so she still got to go on base and deliver. Her soon-to-be ex-husband, the military guy, had his buddies in security forces put a security flag on his soon-to-be ex-wife's boyfriend. The boyfriend couldn't be on base for the birth of his child, and, always the favorite, babies coming out with the wrong ethnic background of the father was at least a once-a-year thing. I got restationed back in the States from Germany. I flew my German girlfriend over and we ended up getting married. She went back to Germany 4 days later and I never saw her again. Whack. While delivering our 4th baby at a military hospital, we were talking to one of the nurses about infidelity and crazy things she had witnessed. She told us about a woman coming in with her husband for a C-section that was not scheduled. The woman insisted that she was scheduled for a C-section that day. They did an ultrasound and found that she was 3 months pregnant, not 9 months pregnant. She was willing to deliver a baby 6 months early so it would appear the conception lined up with her husband's mid-tour leave. Deliver a baby 6 months early. Q. What's the difference between a 12-week delivery by C-section and a medical abortion? A. The C-section takes longer to recover from and is more likely to cause physical complications. Dude in my platoon's wife falsely accused her ex-MP boyfriend of rape, went as far as stabbing a mattress and swallowing condom to set him up. Dude spends weeks in jail before being cleared of all charges. When it comes to light, it was crazy lady vindictive bullshit. She amped up the crazy. She handed her friend her and my platoon mate's baby through a window at night while they watched a movie. Platoon mate went to check on the baby and it was missing. Prompted the first Amber Alert in Alaska history. She tried to pin it on the MP as some sort of act of vengeance. I can only imagine what the poor dude was thinking when the cops came to him with this. He was very quickly eliminated a subject and they figured out that the baby was safe rather quickly. A friend of mine came home one day early from a year-long deployment. Wife was busy another guy on the couch. In the bedroom was a baby she had never mentioned, fathered by yet a third guy. My brother-in-law was on both sides of shitty cheating stories. He married a woman he chatted to online for a few weeks when he was 19, then he had to go to Iraq. A month after he left, she told him that he got her pregnant. He comes home after 6 months, then she has the baby. The baby definitely is not his. Fast forward 10 years. He's married to an awesome chick we all like. She works a job and takes care of everything around the house. He cheats on her with an 18-year-old girl that worked at Sonic. She catches him and leaves for a weekend to go stay with her sister to figure out what to do. He puts all her stuff in cardboard boxes out under the carport and moves in the new girl. He really is a piece of shit. Well, he found Jesus a few years back and now he's still a piece of shit. Just one that blames his shitty behavior on the devil. Heard one not long ago about a lieutenant's wife who copped an attitude when informed that her husband did not qualify her for general officer only parking. Got back from an 8th-month deployment. Buddy's wife was 6 months pregnant. FedEx is amazing, really.